A lot of people here in their master talks have been showing some pretty cool evolution within their skill sets that they specialize in. I thought this could be an interesting opportunity to talk to you guys more about my journey as an artist to being a professional artist to becoming a supervisor in a world-class video game studio, just to kind of maybe give you guys some perspective of where I came from, and you get to see some of my really not so awesome art from back in the day, which make me feel more human, hopefully. And then just some things that whether you're already working professionally or a student that you'll just kind of want to think about whenever you start working and can also be beneficial to you right now. So my name's Seth Thompson. I'm currently a creative development supervisor at Blizzard Entertainment. What that means is if anyone watches the cinematics here, Blizzard cinematics, anyone seen those before? Right on, cool, that's good. So our team there, basically, the awesome thing about it is we get to work on every single IP that all of our games are doing. So sometimes I'm doing dark fantasy for something like Diablo. Other times I'm doing more playful style for Overwatch. You get to work on everything. It's super cool. And the team that I supervise now is all of our concept artists, our sculptors that do all of our cool collectible toys. You know, I'll be in meetings sometimes where I'm looking at like a toy and seeing if it's fun enough to play with. It's pretty cool. And then also working on all the concepts that go into our cinematics, and we also help our games. And it's been quite an evolution through my career to get to that point. So what I'm going to talk to you guys today about is what it was like for me being a child and my artistic roots, then evolving into being a professional artist, working at Blizzard, eventually going into leadership, and then throughout the talk, I'm just going to have little segments where I'll part some industry knowledge that I've learned over the years. So, formative years. I was definitely a very big form as a kid, and as my wife likes to joke, it probably had like a little bottle over there shaking it to get me to smile. If anyone saw Alex Alvarez's talk, he was talking about playing the Atari 2600 when he was a kid. This was my first exposure to video games. I think I was 3 years old. And we got this for Christmas one year, and this is the first video game I ever played, Donkey Kong. And I think I remember playing it. I didn't remember playing it for like 8 hours on Christmas Day to the point that I was getting blisters on my hands, and my parents had to put socks over my hands so I can keep playing. And I don't know what that says about them, but I love video games. So, some of my first memories playing video games. So my other first memories, I was born in 1977. That's when the first Star Wars came out. 1980, I believe, is when The Empire Strikes Back came out. So there was this little theater that we go to sometimes in this farm area that I grew up in, and I remember seeing this movie, and I was so young that it just seemed like it could be a realistic thing that was maybe in some other place within the world. But this left such a huge impression on me. Like movies, sci-fi stuff, video games, even from that small age, I just was mesmerized by this. So even at that young age of 3, I was already doing artwork. So I don't remember this either, but apparently I did good enough to win a prize in a Easter coloring contest as a kid down there. I grew up on a farm, and again, a picture of my family down here. I have 2 sisters, of course a mom and dad. I came from somewhere. And we grew up on a sheep farm. The house in the middle, that's the farm, the house I grew up in, really big farm and big house. And I learned a lot about discipline and hard work as a kid because we'd be up at 5 every morning to feed the sheep before we go to school. I lived so far away from school, it was like an hour commute one way on a bus, then come back in the evening, feed sheep again. And sheep don't take a day off, so you're working 7 days a week. And my parents were constantly working, doing this. My dad was also doing another job. There was just always a lot of hard work, and my parents were never complaining, and just kind of seeing that and being part of that definitely gave me a good discipline growing up to do more. The other thing about being on a farm like this was I didn't have a lot of friends that were my same age, so I think there was like 2 that lived within a 30-minute drive, so those are my friends by default. And because of that, I started playing a lot more video games and would do a lot of artwork myself. I think it was sometime in middle school where I was introduced to the Nintendo 8-bit system. First game I played on that was Castlevania. That left a huge impression on me. To this day, I still have a classic Nintendo game version of that I can play on my Game Boy that I was playing on the flight over here from California, 16 hours straight. I didn't play it 16 hours straight, but I used to back in the day. So I can still remember playing that for the first time and going from the Atari 2600 to something like the Nintendo. I don't even know what leap that would be like today, but it just blew my mind. The level of graphics, how fun the game was, and also how difficult it was. Another game that I played was Final Fantasy I. To this day, that was probably one of the most impactful games I've ever played. And I love RPG games. I remember it was a pretty big deal because I think it was around 10, and I had to use all my birthday money, which is like $50 US, which is like maybe 60 here, which was all I had. And my mom's like, "You sure you want to buy this?" I'm like, "Yes." So I bought it, and everything about the game inspired me, and it still inspires me to this day. And back then, I didn't know what Japan was. A Japanese company made this, and I would see the end of these games when you play them, all these Japanese names. I didn't even know what it was, but I knew one day I was like, if I can, I want to work there. I want to see my name in the credits on a game like that. As I got into high school, I started playing more computer games, not because I had a computer, but my friend did. And Diablo 1 was one I really enjoyed. I really like kind of dark artwork and lots of blood and things like that. So Diablo for me was super fun to play as a kid. And just like playing Final Fantasy, that was another place where I was like, man, I think this is something that I'd want to do. Like Blizzard could be a really cool place to work at. And I have a couple images. You can't really see them at the bottom, but this was some of my first exposure to 3D cinematics. Even though they're just super short, I thought that was a really cool way to tell a story. This is one of my doodles. I probably have hundreds of these. I was digging through them out of my old notebooks and things like this. So this is what I'd be drawing during school. As you can see, like a lot of violent stuff. I have a lot of guys in here that look like the Minions from that Despicable Me or whatever it is, so I have the trademark on that. I should be a millionaire. And these are some old flip books. So again, violent. I loved animating, doing all that. I think the one with the guy falling off a building, I actually drew that in church. I was really bored. But my wife likes to joke that she watches a lot of true crime and different serial killer shows, and she's like, this is the stuff that they see that if they were to find it, they'd say, he's definitely going to kill people when he grows up. So Ninja Gaiden, this is one of the first times I saw any cinematic in a game. This was 2D cinematics that helped tell the storyline of this game, the game was super hard to play. It was almost impossible, but it was the first game I ever played just so I could see the storyline and the cinematics. So love video games, and then starting to see these stories that could be told in here was awesome. But that wasn't enough. Of course, I had to make my own little flip book about it. So I did all that stuff, and eventually they let me graduate from high school. I don't know why. And I went to uni, as you guys call it, university. This is a college I went to in my hometown. I was about 30 minutes away from where I grew up, called James Madison University. So for me, when I was going to college, I was trying to figure out, can I do art and make a living? Am I going to be a starving artist if I get into this? And the college had a really good business program, and my mom, we grew up without a lot of money. She was kind of urging me to get into business. Maybe I could make money doing that, or at least I'd have that option at that school. And my dad, he was always like, just do whatever you love and you'll make money doing it one way or another. And they were both supportive. I'm not going to say my mom wasn't supportive. But I decided to go the artistic route. And this is just some art that I did back in college, some fine art pieces. And I actually worked on a comic strip that I was doing there for a long time, kind of like Alex and some of the other people here at Furio. I was very interested in doing comic books. And in college, I did this comic strip of these characters that basically were just drinking all the time. So once again, you can see my little dude here that looks like the Minion. I totally should have taken advantage of that before. I didn't trademark that, though. So this is one of the comics that was in here. I'd have hundreds of these. I would do these bi-weekly. And usually they were around events that were kind of maybe happening at school. Like at this time point, I remember kids were constantly getting busted for drinking in public. And so this is my take on the cops, coming in, like that TV show in America that's all about our amazing culture there. First CG art piece I ever made. I'm sure a lot of you have portfolios right now where some of your stuff looks like this. And this, I think it was my sophomore year in college that a computer graphics program started with our school. And basically, it was a teacher that was a fine artist that he was interested in learning computer graphics as well. And he was learning along with us. So this is another piece I did, my awesome robot. And you can see there's even a lens flare or two up there. But I think these are good to show because everyone has to start somewhere. And I definitely would have never been hired for anything based off these images if I'd only done this. This is a wedding photo of mine. These are my groomsmen, Jeff and James. I have them listed in here because they were two friends of mine that I met when I was in college. They went to the same class as me. And as some of you probably here have experienced in the past, all of you that are here are probably very focused and driven, otherwise you wouldn't be here. And you know how you get into classes, sometimes there might be 40 people and then you find 2 or 3 that are really focused and you kind of have this creative competition around each other that is healthy. That was us. And we were in the computer lab at any hour that we could until they would kick us out, until we became like lab attendants where we'd stay in there 24 hours a day. And we would always joke about one day being able to work together at a place like Blizzard. Jeff ended up being the first one to get a job there, and he graduated about a year before me, and he's actually still there. He's a vice president at the company now. He's moved up. James ended up supervising our animation team on the cinematic team for many, many years. I put this one up here because I think you can learn from anything. Any job that you do, I think the first job I did other than the farm was dishwashing for about 6 months. I was a cashier at a grocery store, waiting tables, bartending, whatever I could do to pick up some extra money. And some of the lessons that I learned doing those jobs are still some of the most important that I've learned to this day. Like when you're a cashier, you have to interact with any human that's on the earth. Everyone has to eat food. So, the richest of the rich, poorest of the poor, you're interacting with these different people every day. And me, once I got into leadership and supervision, a lot of those skills I learned back then helped out a lot. Another was waiting tables. That was a really important one because much like in leadership, if something happens with your team and someone makes a mistake, whenever someone cooks a steak wrong and you're the waiter, it's your fault. And if you're a leader, it's your fault that someone's doing anything on your team. So it was a good way to quickly learn how to realize things technically aren't my fault, and I can try to quickly fix things. And if you're able to fix things on behalf of your team, they'll respect you more. And then when I was waiting tables, actually some of the best tips I got were from the people that were really angry, and by the end of it, they were really happy. So this is where I start to impart a little bit of industry knowledge as I go through my career evolution with you. Portfolios, generalization or specialization. Some of you have probably talked to me this week or this weekend as we've been here. I think it's, back when I was trying to get into Blizzard, and some companies these days, they want generalists, which means you do everything, you concept, model, texture, etc. That's pretty rare these days. Not a lot of companies do that, especially a big video game company or a feature film studio. So as you guys are out here and you're kind of building your portfolios and figuring out what you want to do, I would just recommend that if you want to work at Blizzard, for example, and you wanted to work on the cinematic team, like our modeling team, basically you only have to model, you only have to sculpt, and you do UVs. You don't have to worry about doing textures, something like that. It's important to bring that up because whenever you're young, trying to get noticed in your career, and you want to do everything, my advice is to kind of figure out where you want to work, focus your portfolio more in a way that you can invest the most amount of time into that one skill set in which you can get noticed by. And that being said, if I see an excellent piece that comes out of like Gnomon that someone did that has everything in it, like we saw in those demo reels, that's super attractive. But the same way, making a really killer character sculpt that's gray shaded and looks awesome is also very powerful if you're targeting a company that maybe just focuses on something like that. So just quickly to go over like our cinematic team, we have like a modeling team, just models, sculpts, UVs, and it get kicked off to a surfacing team. They just surface everything out of Mari, and then they kick it off to like an animation team. There's a rigging team. They're the ones that add all the rigging and bones. We have an effects team. We have a lighting team. Most feature film studios are kind of like that. So if you're trying to get into a place like that, you may just want to focus on one area, at least to get your foot in the door to start with. And then if you're going to try and get into a video game company, try and find maybe some people that work at those that can give you a little bit of advice about what they're looking for. And then like a lot of people, if they were interested in working on something like World of Warcraft, then you're going to want to create a character that looks like it could fit into that game. Very painterly feel. That kind of stuff is always helpful. Quality over quantity. For me, whenever I'm looking at portfolios, I would prefer to see 1 or 2 really kick-ass pieces of artwork than 20 pieces of mediocre artwork. That being said, you know, I don't want to discourage anyone here from posting their art because it's good to constantly get feedback. You know, what I tend to look at when I'm hiring people, and a lot of people in our company, is even if it took you a year to make something like an amazing piece of artwork, I know that I can take that person, put them into our pipeline, teach them new tools and different things, but the core is I know they can make something kick-ass. And that tells me a lot and helps separate them from the competition. Fan art, this is one, I mean, I like doing fan art as well. What I recommend for anyone that's doing that is if you're doing something based on an image or a model that already exists, like a screenshot from a game, and you want to get that company to notice you, it may sound harsh, but try to make it as good as that piece is or better. The reason why is you're basically doing an art test for them for free, and if they're seeing that you can't produce a result that's as good as what they've done, unfortunately, they may not be interested in you if that's how you're trying to sell yourself. So if you're doing something, make sure that looks as good as that or better. If you do want to do something based on a concept a company exists with, I would almost recommend doing that because that allows you to take something that would be provided to you at a company anyways, and then show that you can produce a good result that would fit within that style. And I think that's something they do a lot at Gnomon that I really love seeing. One thing too, a lot of people that I see these days is kit bashing gets more and more popular. It's cool if you want to do it, just make sure that you give credit to the people that have provided the models if you're buying them. I can't tell you the amount of times that I've had demo reels come through and I'm like, that's all Vitaly stuff, you didn't do that. And someone's claiming they did that. This is a guy named Vitaly Bolgarov. I even had one artist that was showing me a piece like this Mayan ruins type thing with all these interested sculpted stones and all these things and telling me everything he did. And half of it was made up of models that I released on a Gnomon DVD. And he was trying to claim it as his own, so just don't do that. I think once he realized that was me that did that, he was kind of shocked. Personal art. I'd say even whenever you become a professional, it's really important to keep doing personal art. One, I think it just continues to show that you have that creative drive. All of us that are artists, hopefully you're getting into this because you love doing art and you want to be creative all the time. Me, I do it because these days I supervise and I don't get to do a lot of art on the job and I have to have a creative outlet, so I want to do it. But the thing that is, I think, really important about personal art is it shows exactly what you can do. You know, I get to see some amazing demo reels sometimes of people that have worked on these huge effects movies from Hollywood, etc. And in the end, they'll be like, yeah, I made that brick. And I'm like, okay, that's cool, but that doesn't help. You're not hireable because of that. So personal art can show a lot of times exactly what you can do 100% on your own. For me, it's important because I can explore new software and techniques. There's a bunch of different stuff I want to test out when I get home just from seeing it this weekend. So a lot of times just the nature of working in a professional environment is you may not have amount of time on the job to actually learn new stuff just because of the nature of deadlines. So it's a great way that you can continue to do that once you become a professional. Freedom, you know, get to be your own art director. That's great because whenever you get to work, it can be easy to just constantly be doing someone else's vision, so it's nice to do your own thing. And then hireability, the way I look at this is if I'm comparing 2 portfolios that are equally as awesome that contain professional artwork, and then one person has on top of that a couple pieces of killer personal artwork, I'm usually going to hire that person that also has that personal artwork over the other one that didn't have any. That can sound harsh, I guess, because some people literally, maybe they don't have time on the side, but I've always found that people that really like it will always find the time to do it. Oh, and then, yeah, this is just a piece I did about 5 years ago. This was a fan art piece I did after playing the game Uncharted 2. I don't know if you guys have played the Uncharted games. Basically, this was just kind of my idea of what I guess maybe a photorealistic location would look like within the Uncharted universe. And I found out a couple months ago, one of their lead environment artists from Naughty Dog, he started working at Blizzard, the company Naughty Dog that made the game. And he was like, oh, you're Seth Thompson? I'm like, yeah. He's like, we use your image as like a constant, like a key art thing as the goal that we wanted to reach for Uncharted 4. Every time we saw that we needed to reach that level, I was like, that's freaking awesome. And I remember going back that the recruiters were reaching out to me for a while. But Blizzard's pretty awesome. I didn't want to leave there. And by the way, this thing, I didn't do it overnight. This took me, I think, about 14 months. So it took me a long, long time. Man, you know, sometimes I can only find 30 minutes here and there. Sometimes I'll find 4 hours. But this would be an example, I would say, of you don't have to do something in a month. If you need to take time to do something well, do it. You guys probably saw this. This is the most recent piece that I did. I was showing off some of that. It's from the game Dark Souls 3. Game super inspired me. It's about the hardest game I've ever played since Castlevania 1 back in the day. So luckily I didn't break my computers or anything as I'm playing these, because anyone that's played that here, it's a love-hate relationship for sure. I'm showing this. This is an example of some artwork that, like, I supervise our concept team now, but before that I supervised our environment modeling team at Cinematics. And one of our best environment artists is this guy named Sang-Jun Song, and we hired him based off this. You know, you're like, what? Why would you hire an environment guy based off of a character art? This was something that he did actually after he graduated from school. He graduated, he did this, and we ended up picking him over a lot of people that had been in the industry for like 15 plus years. And this is just a good example of how personal art, if someone can create something like this from scratch, and it's 100% their own, you know you can take an artist like that and you can also have them do environments and everything else. Those skills kind of come over pretty well. This is another guy, and by the way, some of these people are way up there. I don't even know if I can do this stuff, so don't expect that you have to create this level of art. I'm putting this up here because these are some of the people that inspire me. Tony Pertinchevek, he's an amazing environment artist. He was a guy I was a fan of for many, many years, and then over time I got to meet him and then ended up hiring him, so he's still at Blizzard, and he's a constant source of inspiration for me. Okay, so targeting portfolios, commitment, and believing in yourself. Knowing where you want to work is important, so that if you really, unless you're just like, I just need a job, you know, just focus on whatever you think is good. But in my case, back when I was graduating from college, I really wanted to work at Blizzard. And in order to do that back then, I wanted to be on the cinematic team, and back then they would only hire people that could basically make a short film. So you had to be able to take a thing from concept to final render and do everything by yourself. So the bar was pretty high back then. Now we're much more specialized. Commitment, you know, whenever you get focused on something, seeing it through, whether it's a personal piece of art, especially when that stuff gets hard, that's when you need to power through it and just make it happen, and you're going to learn a lot from that. And then believe in yourself. You guys probably have a lot of naysayers out there, people that are telling you might not be able to do things. Use that stuff as fuel. I don't even know, even to this day, there's a lot of times, whether it was me applying for this new position, where I'd have people be like, why would you do that? That's not in your skill set, these things. Use those things as fuel, just believe in yourself. So the dream job, Blizzard. Basically, and I'll show you here in a minute, I had to create a cinematic movie, and in order to do that, I had to create that targeted portfolio. So here's some images of, before I do that, I'll go back. I graduated from college. What I had at the time wasn't good enough for me to get hired. Maybe it would have been, but it wouldn't have been good enough for Blizzard. So I was fortunate enough to get enough graduation money that I could buy a nice computer and get some software. My parents let me move back with them, and I lived with them for about a year and just worked nonstop on creating a demo reel to try to get hired there. So that's what I'm going to kind of show you next. And this is back in 1999. So I did a lot of comics back then, so these are some early storyboards. I'm just going to flip through these pretty quick. That's actually me. I put myself in the video. And we had to basically show that you could storyboard, concept, get an idea of what camera angles would look like, things like that. These are a couple renders of some of the stuff from back in the day that went onto my demo reel. Different characters. You can see me up there in the top. Again, showing kind of like concept to render, different things that I did. That's my headshot back in the day. And actually, if we can turn the sound up, this is the actual demo reel. We'll just let that play. Sorry, it's really low res, but just let it play.
offer a welcoming hand. We take pride in our
fun and exciting
work atmosphere as we bury our competition and blow it away.
That was my sister's voice. Had to do all the sounds too. Sorry, it's a little dark up here.
Identification successful.
Okay. Great. Just great.
We've been waiting for you, Seth. Please, have a seat. Both of you know why you're here. You are the best of the best. Unfortunately, there can be only one. Hey, yo, what the?
Wait, I don't even want to work.
Gentlemen, I believe it is time for a drink. Before we may proceed with our final testing exercises, certain liabilities require I obtain your permission. Very good. Huh? Gentlemen, you will now be engaged in a virtual reality-based test in which you must compete amongst one another for victory. Good luck.
We can turn the sound down on it now, but we'll let it play out. So that's what I had to create back in the day. I was much more ambitious. I wanted to do more, but I just didn't have time, and that was enough to get me hired. So I was like, all right, that's good enough. But you can see just some of the different people to thank, all this kind of thing. Yeah, fun stuff. That brings back memories. I remember I was even like that cigarette or the cigar thing. I was always obsessed about getting a reference. I remember I had to get my dad to like buy me cigars, and I was out in the shed. And my mom's like, "What is he doing out there?" It's like, "Don't worry about it," because I'm like doing this, and I couldn't record anything. We didn't have iPhones. I had to just remember what that looked like. I just reeked of smoke for a while. So demo reel fun facts. I worked on that thing a lot. I put a lot of hours into it. I think probably around 3,800 hours. I was trying to do the numbers. I was working about 12 hours a day, 7 days a week to get that done for about 11 months. I was learning new software at the time. 3D Studio Max back then was a great program to use for animation, and I needed it because I was working with Lightwave in the time, and it just wouldn't do what I needed for characters. Premiere, After Effects, that's what I did all the comping in. I didn't even know what a Wacom was back then, so everything was done with my mouse. And whenever I got to Blizzard, I remember being like, what are these things? These are amazing. Internet back then, it was only dial-up. I think it wasn't until I graduated from college I even had an email address. So there wasn't anywhere that you could get tutorials or anything. You just had to figure it out, or you had textbooks that you learned. I learned to cook when I was doing that because when I was staying with my parents, they didn't make me pay for anything. I wanted to help out as much as I could, so I made them a ton of meals all the time. My wife still likes me doing that for her all the time. It works out pretty well. And back here, a lot of you might not even know what this is. This is called a VHS tape. So that's how you had to send out your demo reel back in the day. So I had packages, I sent it out to all sorts of places. And then everything was done with a 2-button mouse. Didn't even have a little rolly wheel. Good times. So yeah, I landed the job at Blizzard Entertainment, and I was working on Warcraft 3, Reign of Chaos. Anyone here see the cinematics for that back in the day? Awesome, that's great. So for me, back then, I guess it was like 14 people in the cinematic team. We're now a team of 300 people, so we've grown quite a bit. So back then we had to do everything, and this is the very first piece I worked on. This is from the Betrayal of Arthas cinematic. So this is the opening shot I did, and concept for the bell that I created, and then everything you see in there to the final render I created. That was really fun. And I got to work on that entire opening sequence. These are more concepts, and it was a really fun piece to work on, all the different environments. I was always, even to these days, I try to put things that are representative of the culture or whatever it is that's in the game. You can't really see them in there. There's these little lion heads, other stuff, because it was in Lordaeron. It's all about lions, etc. There were some character guys I did up there in the top right corner. Remember this? I love drawing like little intricate stuff. I turned this into a vector map and then displaced it and used it for like the bridge up there. That was a lot of fun. So anywhere in your career, at any point, whether it's you as students now or you're a professional like me that's been doing this for almost 20 years, find mentors. I still have mentors to this day. For supervision, art, like I look at all the work here. Jessica, she'll be my marvelous designer mentor whenever I start working with that. Always look for mentors. And whenever you can do it at work. If you can't, if you want to find someone online that you think could be a good mentor to you that will actually reply to you, and it can be hard to find them, try and seek out people and do that. The thing about it, though, is if you are lucky enough to get one of the awesome artists that have been presenting here to critique your work and do things, make sure that you apply the feedback that they give you. The last thing that you want to do is have someone spend a half hour doing a paint over on something when they don't even have that much time to call the parents at home and then not do anything or complain about it. And that honestly happens the majority of the time with the feedback I give people. You'd be surprised. So also real feedback, finding a mentor that's not going to just be like, hey, yeah, you're awesome, or your parents like, yeah, you're awesome. Find people that are going to really tell you, like, you got a long ways to go. And those are the people you want to surround yourself with because they're always going to push you and drive you further. So at Blizzard, another cinematic I worked on for Warcraft 3 Reign of Chaos was the Death of Hellscream cinematic. So my mentor at the time was a guy named Patrick Thomas, and he was just amazing with environment art. Like, this is back before you could do sculpting with ZBrush. All the displacement we had to do for these was done with 2D maps and understanding how grayscale values will actually displace things. And it's something that I'd like to teach people in the future because a lot of people just don't really understand how that works. But these are some things we got to work on. He was working on some of the base parts of these sets, and then he just handed it to me. He was like, here's the techniques, build it. So got to build all this stuff. That one's really dark. We'll just skip that. Yeah. A lot of fun stuff there. There's I was able to find some of the individual assets that I created. So, this is the first time I was ever kit bashing, creating different rocks and elements, and then kind of combining them and putting them in there. There was an all 3D painting program that I started using. I can't remember the name of it, but it was pretty fun to use. And in California, I went down by the beach, took a bunch of rock photos, things like that, and then that's what I used to turn this stuff into displaced stuff. And that's, about 20 years ago. It still holds up okay, I think. And then also one thing that I learned from my mentor is whenever you're working with organic stuff, natural elements, for anyone out here who wants to be an environment artist, don't think that if you need to make a realistic tree that you only have to use a bark image to do something. A lot of times, because nature has tons of repeating patterns all the time, you can do some really creative things with something that exists, like a galaxy map. The spiral galaxy, I took this, inverted that, and that became the ground that you see up there, just moving around. And that worked way better than trying to find a huge rock image. I think if maybe I had Zach here with his drone, I don't know if he showed you any stuff he was doing in his map painting classes, he would have been able to give me some stuff. But that was a really valuable lesson for me to learn. So everywhere I go now, I'm taking photos of stuff. I'll invert it, I'll make displacement maps out of it, and you never know what you can do. Up here, so what I always recommend for people whenever they're getting into, once you land that first job, always find areas that you can be the most help of in a place. You're going to be entry level. They're probably going to have you doing a lot of not so fun stuff anyways. But if you can be that person that maybe can fill a spot that a lot of people don't want to do but is needed, it can be very beneficial. In my case at Blizzard, Patrick, my mentor, he was the only guy that was doing environments. No one really wanted to do them. Everyone wanted to do characters or animate. In fact, I thought I was going to become an animator. And they needed help with it. So I just focused on doing that and turned into like a 15-year career. And the other thing I would say is be willing to work on anything. Work is work for a reason. You got to have fun there and do all that. But if someone tells you to put a nose upside down on a character, do it. So this part I want to talk about a little bit. I don't want to intimidate people. The CG industry is hard. There is a lot of hours. You probably heard that over and over. But the way that I look at it is it's equal parts passion, equal parts labor. I don't want to paint the impression that you're in a Viking ship and people are whipping you on the back. It's not like that. I mean, maybe sometimes a little bit, but I like a little pain, so it's okay. I constantly, even though these days I only have to work about 40 hours a week, I usually put in more time on the side just because I always want to keep learning and I love what I do. But that being said, there are jobs that you can work 40 hours a week and go home and just do whatever you want. That's totally fine. So you can do those things. The reason I put this in here, though, is, in this next slide about mastery, is if you want to be the best in the world-class people like a Fausto De Martini or a Vitaly Bulgarov or a Mozart, you are going to have to work a lot, and you should expect that. And not everyone does that, and that's totally fine. You don't have to be a master, but I put this stuff up here just to illustrate that a lot of people, I think maybe even Alex was talking about this and some others, a lot of people talk about like this person has talent or this person has the talent gene. I don't really see that. It's usually about the amount of time you put in. Any of these guys will tell you that, how'd you get so good? It's like, well, this is all I do. I do this nonstop. So if you work on something all the time, you're going to become good at it, whether it's cooking or dancing or creating artwork like this. 10,000 hours of mastery, I think this is one of those things that, you're not going to be a master after 10,000 hours, but I do see different stages of time where you put time into things where it feels like around that time you're pretty good at that essential thing, but then something new comes up, or maybe you evolve and you move to another place. So it is kind of an interesting number to look at. So no secret, a lot of hours. So Blizzard, I was there for 3 years when I was working on World of Warcraft, Warcraft 3, and originally in the cinematics back in the day. And I think I tallied up about how many hours we were working then. It was pretty crazy. We were doing about 12 hours a day, 6 days a week. I think that the last 6 months that we were working on Warcraft 3 cinematics, we were like 7 days a week. I was like sleeping over at the office. So I had worked about 11,000 hours, and I felt pretty good about environments by that point. This other one, Wolfgang Mozart, the thing that's kind of interesting about him is even at the age of 3, he was already playing music. He was exposed to a family that, like his father was a musician, I think even of an orchestra. They were very well known in the area that they lived for music. So by the time that Mozart was around 6 or 7, he was already starting to write his own songs, symphonies. And most people, someone shook their head, maybe that's not right. Oh, okay, gotcha. Just surprised, yeah. I'm like, I don't know if this is exactly right. But I'm sure he was totally hungover the morning he made that sonnet there. But I like that story because a lot of the musicians back then, they maybe didn't even start sort of writing until they were around 12 or 13. He was already doing this stuff when he was like 6 or 7. So by the time he was 13, he was actually writing symphonies that orchestras were picking up. And it wasn't because he was a musical genius. It was because he was the type, even as a kid, when parents tried to take music away from him, he'd pretend he was asleep and then wake up and to candlelight start writing more stuff. Lots and lots of hours to mastery. Starcraft Ghosts, this was something that we were working on that got canceled back in the day. We do that a lot at Blizzard, actually. You work on a project for a long time, a lot of money spent, but if it's not up to par, it might not get released. Again, sorry, this is a little dark. Just showing some more artwork that I did. This was some of my first hard surface modeling. I was doing all the concepts for this. These were some drop ships that were in the cinematic with these Terran Marines. A couple more angles that too dark to see. Some exterior environments back then. I didn't really know how to do map painting, so I would just displace everything. I would approach that much differently with what I know now. This was one of the final things I worked on at Blizzard before I took a different job that I'll tell you about in a minute. So this is from the Warcraft 3 Frozen Throne cinematic. I didn't do the whole thing. I was mentoring some other artists to do the glaciers in the foreground, showing them how to use displacement, etc. But I did work on that ice tower in the back. I like that shot a lot. So the dream evolves, Square-Enix. In college, I was like listening to some Japanese tapes, different things, and I'll go back to this one in a minute. And then I started taking some night classes when I was working at Blizzard and learned some basic Japanese grammar, and then one thing led to another, and coincidentally I ran into a guy that was visiting Los Angeles that worked on the cinematic team at Square-Enix, and he barely spoke any English, I barely spoke any Japanese, but we became friends and then communicated, and over time I was able to get a job over there, and I'll tell you about that in a second. Never burn a bridge. So I put this in here because whether it's your friends or you're working, especially in CG, anything, you never want to burn a bridge. You never know who you're going to work with in the future one day. Whether it's like a boss one day that you just hated working with. They might have a career evolution. They'll change and be someone you would want to work with one day. I would just say anytime that you go somewhere, don't burn a bridge. And when I left Blizzard to go work at Square-Enix, I took a big pay cut to go there. For me, it wasn't about money, it was about passion, something I wanted to do ever since I was a kid, and it was an opportunity I just couldn't pass up on. I mean, literally the only two places I'd ever wanted to work at that point were Blizzard and Square-Enix, and it was really hard to leave there, to leave Blizzard, and I was doing really well, but when that opportunity presented itself and I was offered a job, I had to do it, and they understood. They tried to negotiate with me, there was no negotiation, I just did it. And this is some important things I recommend that you guys keep with you once you get into this career. Minimum, if you ever have to leave a company, always give at least 2 weeks notice. Honestly, I think you need to give more time than that. Ideally, if you're close to being done with the end of a project, like a game, and it's only going to be another 2 months or something, try and wrap that up so that you don't leave people in a hard space behind you, because people will remember that last 2 weeks that you were in a company more so sometimes than your entire career, unfortunately. So it's really important that within that last 2 weeks, even if you hated the company, you hated your boss or different things, that's not the time to suddenly tell everyone in the company, like, screw this place, all that, because that'll stick with you. And I've seen it happen to some friends of mine that they want to come back to where I'm at now, and they can't, unfortunately. No anger, no surprises. I just put that in there, again, just to say that's usually not the time to start telling everyone everything that was wrong. The time that if you're working at a company and there's some issues you have with things, if you're able to try and present that beforehand, maybe someone can fix that stuff and you won't want to leave. I don't know. So I would just say, be careful whenever you leave a company, because it will happen with you guys at some point in the future. Integrity. This was a big thing that I learned when I moved to Japan. Your word is your bond there. So if anyone ever has a chance to work in Japan, like even if you tell someone I'm going to be somewhere at 3 o'clock, don't be late. Like even 5 or 10 minutes late can ruin a relationship with somebody. And it was very interesting when I was negotiating with them on the phone and they told me how much I was going to make and do all these things. I was like, awesome. And they're like, cool, just come on over. And they didn't send me a contract or do anything. And I had to reach back out to them like, hey, when do I sign a thing? They're like, oh, just get here and we'll handle it. So that was like how hardcore it was over there back then, is if they said, like, you've got a job, even if you're uprooting yourself from another country and going, that means they're not going to turn their back on you. They're going to take you in. I did ask them to send something to me, and I signed it, but that just gives you an idea of, at least when I was in that culture, like how much when someone says something, they see it through and they do it. This is an art test I did for them. The concept on the right is what they sent me, and on the left was a final render I made for an environment position. Okay, so when I got there, I didn't know what I was going to work on. They told me it was something secret, and I didn't care. I would have worked on anything they would have given me. I was fortunate enough that they let me work on the movie Advent Children. I don't know if anyone's seen that here. Anyone? Sweet, cool. So I was beyond excited to know that I would get to work on this. And this is actually the very first thing I worked on when I moved there. And with the exception of the huge Zeus cannon in the background, I created everything from concept to final completion, texturing, modeling, layout, lighting, etc. I had a month to do that. And that was a lot of hours, over 6 days a week, probably 12 to 14 hours a day. Actually, sorry, the cannon someone else did in the background, a guy named Saito, who became my mentor at Square-Enix. And then those big plates that you see up at the top, that was the actual plates from Final Fantasy VII, the original game of like the Midgar city. And I remember they gave me those, and like, here, just use those if you want them. And I was like, this is like the Mona Lisa. I'm touching this stuff. I need to have gloves on. And I still get goosebumps thinking about that, because that stuff affected me so much and inspired me. So when I created this, again, like I always like to put little references into things that people might recognize. For people in here, like on the top left, you can see Aerith in the game. She was jumping down from these two kind of columns. I tried to put that into there as like a little fan treat, and then create like little other locations people might recognize from the game that you could see in the cinematic. This one, I'll just talk to you a little bit about what it was like working there. So on Advent Children, this is just going to play for about 4 minutes. It started out really small. It wasn't even going to be a movie originally. It was supposed to be like a 7-minute promotional video to get people excited about all these different games that they wanted to do for Final Fantasy VII. So we released some stuff for the Tokyo Game Show, like that first movie I showed you a minute ago, and people got really excited about it. So then the company was like, you know what, let's make a 20-minute thing, and we'll tell more story about each thing, but we're not going to give you any more people to help out. We still want it done at the same time. So people got more excited about that, and then they were like, you know what, let's do 50 minutes, and eventually it's like we have a 110-minute feature-length film, and the story just kind of kept evolving. And it wasn't until I think we were working on that from concept to final completion. We finished that film in 2.5 years, which is insane. And on the entire thing, there's basically 3 environment artists. So I'm showing you this clip because I was responsible for concept, design, modeling, texturing, lighting of everything you see here for the environments, all of it. And there's some of the stuff that's further in the background that I had some help with, but for the most part I was doing that. And there were some insane hours. I remember pulling 110 hours in a week in 6 days sometimes. I didn't even know that was possible, but you can do it. And I really enjoyed it. I learned so much there, and to be part of something this cool was a great experience. It was definitely really challenging though, because back then, everything that you see in all of these shots is full geo. There's no map painting at all. Even mountains that you'll see in the background are all modeled and textured. In order to do that, by the way, this next shot coming up in a minute is one of the hardest shots I've ever worked on in my entire career. Let's see where it is. Coming up here in a minute. Here we go. So this next shot was really, really, really insanely challenging because this complex fly-through of the entire city, it saw every angle of the city that I had to create. I had every single character pretty much interacting. All these different complex angles, all these different actions occurring. That was just insane to work on. Like the entire city that I had to do in there, I remember I had to break it up into about 12 different sections, like a pie slice, and then for each section I also had low poly models, as well as the high poly models. I'd have to swap them out if a camera went really quick. I'd swap out from frame 52 to 70 and make it like a lower poly model so it would blur out. It was really intense to get all that stuff to render. But again, it was a great experience to work on that. The only other thing I worked on when I was at Square-Enix was some cinematics for Final Fantasy XII. And the only reason I got to work on that was because I saw a cinematic for this thing called the Tower of Pharos, or not a cinematic, a concept. And I begged my directors to let me work on it. So they were like, all right, if you can finish this thing, all of it, in less than a month, you can work on it. I was like, cool. So I did this in less than a month. This is, at the time when I was working on this, I didn't know how close the camera was going to get. They weren't very organized with setting up cameras and knowing what you were going to see. So I had to be able to create detail down to the smallest super tiny window that's in there like a dot. There's actually geo inside all those things because the characters might get zoomed in and get really close to it. So this was a really fun piece to work on. I really, really enjoyed doing this. And like most of the stuff I would do there, they wouldn't tell me until the end that they were going to blow something up. So the top of this got destroyed in the end. Yeah, there's the top all destroyed. All right, Japan culture. So, otsukare-sama. That was a phrase that you would say whenever you're passing people in the hallway. Kochira de daraka nihongo hanaseru koto ga dekimasu ka? Ah, yokatta. If anyone wants to say, yeah, right, Furio. I learned to speak Japanese there. If you're from Japan, you're probably familiar with otsukare-sama, which basically is a way of saying thank you to someone for working really hard, and it literally translates to like he or she who's tired from overwork. So instead of saying good morning, all that, when you're in the office, it's like otsukaresama. When you're really tired, it's usually like ugh, about like that. Shogunai. This was a word that I really liked as well. That just I couldn't really find a way that it translates into other language, and it's more a feeling. Whenever you have to work overtime, you have to get something done, and the deadline's insane. Shogunai. People just say this and never complain. It's like, well, you got to do it. It's like, let's get it done. And I'm so used to sometimes being in the U.S. and other places where people are like, I have to work past 8, come on. So the hours there were insane on Advent Children and everything else, but no one ever complained. It blew me away. Nomikai, the culture over there, we definitely went out and had a lot of drinks and had fun in the evenings. You would literally see people like this on subways. And it was always interesting. I remember in Tokyo, during the week, people would just be, very focused, like walking very straight. And then come Friday night, like everyone's just everywhere. You're stepping over people on the street sometimes. And once or twice, I was probably those people too. And over here is a picture of me and Jessica, some other people visiting our friends from there a couple years ago. And down at the bottom, again, kind of going to those hours of mastery. I was there for about 3 years. Worked about roughly 80 hours a week, came out to about 12,000 hours or so. So at that point, I was kind of like on another level of mastery. These days, it's not that insane there. That was a especially busy time. They still work pretty hard. I talked to the guys and I'm like, you should come back. We're only doing 60 to 70 hours a week. But no, Square-Enix is really awesome. And they're actually hiring more and more people internationally these days. But anyways, I finally realized that childhood dream. There's my name. In the credits. I did it. Yes. So, again, I get kind of goosebumps seeing that. But that was the credits at the end of Advent Children. After 3 years there, went back to Blizzard. I thought I would stay in Japan a lot longer, but I was really tired from doing a lot of work and different things, and I just had a good opportunity to go back and decided to do it. So at that point, the company had started to evolve. When I guess I left Blizzard back in 2003, the company itself was only around 200 people. Today, it's around 5,000 worldwide. When I came back, it was probably more like 500, and that cinematic team, when I left, that was 14 people. At that point, it was probably around 25. And they were starting to go from a generalization to more specialized states. So it's very interesting to be part of a company that evolves and starts to grow bigger over time, and you needing to be able to evolve with that. That's something I'd say for you, those of you that are here that are getting into this industry. Things do change over time, and that's why it's important to constantly be polishing and mastering your craft. More people, it does mean more management sometimes. So I think that it was about the time that our team, I guess once I came back, probably about 2 years after I was back, the cinematic team grew to about 50 people. And at that point, some things started falling apart. People were career focused on different things. And they just didn't have a lot of managers. We were just all artists buddying up and doing things, but people wanted to know how they get promoted. People wanted to do different stuff, and we started to have to introduce more layers of management, started specializing more, like our modeling team went from people that do everything to people that model texture as well as concept. But it was starting to narrow down and change. Best artists equals best managers, I don't know, but back then, and typically in a company that you're at, if it evolves and starts to become successful, they generally will take the best artists or people and put them in a management position. And that can be a real challenge because sometimes the best artists are not the best managers. And I probably started managing, I guess, about 3 years after I came back from Blizzard, so that was probably 8 or 9 years into my career. I created at the time what was called the environment modeling team, and I definitely made a lot of mistakes at the beginning, and I'll talk to you about that a little bit. So this is kind of where I get away from more really awesome artistic images and talk to you a bit about things I've learned as I've gone into leadership, and then also I'll kind of share some knowledge I think that'll be helpful for you guys even wanting to get into this industry and stuff that I feel is important I carry with me to this day. What does managing mean at your company? I think a lot of people just assume, they're like, you know what, one day I'm going to be that supervisor at a place. I'm going to be a leader because that's the most awesome position to do, and I'll be able to change everything, and it's awesome, and blah, 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 blah. A lot of times, whenever you're managing and you get into that position and you're finally like, yeah, I can make all the creative decisions, you're doing a lot of this stuff. You're looking at a lot of charts, a lot of things. So know what it means at your company. Some companies have it set up in a way that the leader within a discipline that you're within can be focused more creatively, but other places it means it's attachment from art, and you're going to be doing a lot of career development with people. I have this thing that says supervisors and art managers. At Blizzard, our cinematic team that I'm on, a supervisor is in all these meetings. They're doing all the graph stuff. They're helping with career development, all that. But on the game teams, they actually have what's called a supervisor and art manager. Art manager is working with all the career development of people, whereas the supervisor is the artistic expert of their discipline, and they're more hands-off with like the one-on-ones and meetings with people so they get to remain creative. So even in a place like Blizzard, it means different things in different departments. So if that's something you want to do one day, just kind of know what it means, to lead or not to lead. Now, this is a 3D print of that skull I made recently. I wanted to bring one, it just didn't fit in my luggage. So for me, I wanted to lead back then, and I wanted to just show you a couple images of what I think leadership is within Blizzard. Compassion. This is one of my artists working on the Bastion cinematic, and you can see I'm trying to encourage him and work harder. Patience. This one I couldn't help. I was trying to do a serious face. I was laughing. Respect, you earn respect over time. And then feedback. I put this one in here because most of those I'm just joking around, but this one I actually believe in. As a leader, one of the things I like to do is I constantly turn things around with my team, and I'll be like, hey, what do you think of this thing? And at first they'll kind of be like, yeah, it's cool and all that, and I'm like, no, really, what do you think? And then they'll like dig into me. I'm like, oh my God, okay. And that helps honestly develop a lot of trust between me and the team. So it's not just me being the one all the time that's like, you need to do this. If anyone here ever becomes a supervisor does that, I recommend you find opportunities to do that, to open yourself up and humanize yourself to other people. But do expect this could be your calendar. This is, my calendar is even more crazy now. This is back when I used to have free time to do art on the job. But this will give you an idea of what you could be looking into. Lots of meetings, especially as a company gets big. And another thing I look at a lot these days is bid sheets, stuff like that. I think this is from our Bastion cinematic. All these things mean different things. You can see over here, it's like 15 days to create this, and then just like little different things. So just expect sometimes being a leader can be a lot of this stuff. All right, so me, when I first started managing, I made a lot of mistakes. I definitely micromanaged the crap out of people, and because I was so worried about making sure whatever came out of our team was going to be the best quality possible, and that wasn't the best thing to do. I definitely do not micromanage people now. And it's something that it just happens over time. You got to kind of evolve and learn out of it. Small team equals discipline focus. This, again, I'm just bringing this up. If you're starting at a company and you become a leader and you have a team of maybe 3 people or less, I tend to find that then you're still doing a lot of creative work on the job, depending on what your company structure is. And when I first started, I had about 3 people on the team, and I was doing about 50% art still on the job, and then management. As the team grew bigger, I find usually once you get around 8 or 9 people, you're doing a lot less art on the job if you want to actually be leading a team successfully. Letting go. Yeah, that was something I had to do whenever I started having a larger team, is like letting go of the fact that I'm not going to be able to do as much art, but what I am doing is important, leading people and whatnot. Going back to kind of that 10,000 hours thing, the thing that's interesting about management is the only place you can really get the training for that is on the job. When I clock out and I go home, I'm not learning from managing there. And it was funny, I felt like literally it took me about 5 or 6 years where I really kind of got the hang of things. And as I was doing the numbers again and breaking things down with like taking time off, sick days, all that, it took me about that long to get to that 10,000 hour mark. Company growth, management roles change. Yeah, I've kind of talking about that here and there. As the company grew bigger, at one point it was seen well to be the artistic leader, and then at some point something swapped when the company evolved, and our best leaders were becoming the ones that were hands-off on art, but helping facilitate things for people. And I remember one of the worst annual reviews I ever got was because I wasn't able to transition right away. I couldn't let go of just doing the art, but I had to in that position to be successful. And I don't know what my point here is. I had a hard review. It was good. It woke me up, and then I realized I needed to focus more on just how to make my team better. One thing that I always try to do is hire people better than me. I tend to find a lot of people are like worried that if they hire someone better than them, that person's going to want to take their job from them. That's pretty much, in my experience, never the case. People want to work with the best people that are possible. So I'm always looking at people that are way better than me at what I do, hoping that, if something did happen to me, that you have someone that's super talented at what they are that can take your space. And then also, too, just hiring good people will make other good people want to work with you. Delegation, empowerment, facilitation. I mean, the way that I found to be a successful manager, at least on my team, is to be 100% at the disposal of my team, giving them all the tools that they need to work, helping them with difficult conversations, clearing the path for them. I like this quote. And this is, one of those micromanagement things. I don't even have to go over that one. It just means a lot. You show people, tell them what the goal is, and then a lot of times they'll surprise you, and also people will tend to take on a lot of these things that you normally wouldn't think someone would want to do, like something that's not as fun artistically, but suddenly they have ownership over something. So giving people a goal and then letting them do what they can to achieve it is a great thing. So I think it was about 3 years ago, I'm talking about how things kept evolving, and I had some struggles, like do I want to supervise or continue to be artistic? I got to a point that I realized, okay, if I'm going to do this right, one, for my company, how they look at how they want supervisors, meaning that you're that person to help facilitate and clear the path, to be successful. And then me having this dilemma inside myself, like I still just want to be this creative badass. I want to be going to work and creating all the cool things that I'm seeing. Like it was really hard to realize, like, all right, if I'm going to do this right as a manager, I need to be totally okay with I'm not going to do any more art on the job. Is that going to be something I'm cool with? And I remember talking to my managers. I went to them. I'm like, hey, I'm thinking about not doing this anymore. Would it be cool to go back to just doing art? And that was terrifying. I thought they would fire me. And they're like, nah, whatever. Just let us know. We'll work it out. But we think this is great if you can continue doing this. And I remember my friend that I was talking about before, Jeff Chamberlain, who's now a vice president in our company, one of the things that made the biggest impact on me was him telling me, he was like, I do this because I lead and I do these things because I can have a bigger impact on the overall product, the people, create these environments that you want to work for and everyone else. I know I can always go back to doing art. I have confidence in myself. I can do those things. And it's a lot easier for me to go back doing art than it is for me to continue doing this role and have that opportunity to do things. And just feeling that support from someone that was like, hey, it's okay if you want to go back to doing art, we'll support that. But also, by the way, you're pretty good at doing this thing. And think of the impact you can have has really made a difference for me. So Management 101. No surprises. I pull this up because whenever you get in a company that has like annual reviews, things like that, if you want to get management, you shouldn't be surprising someone at the end of a year and being like, hey, here's all the areas that you screwed up on. And it's like, well, if you told me about throughout the year, maybe I could have fixed those. You should be telling people like areas that they can improve on before you surprise them at the end and it affects their salary. Bad apple can spoil the bunch. This is a really important one. You get someone that maybe has an ego issue or they're constantly causing conflict on a team. Usually those people don't leave. They're the ones that drive away your best people. So as a manager, you got to make some hard decisions sometimes to keep the best people on the team. People rarely change. I think this is more of a personal opinion of mine. I've just found that, I've had situations where I've had to put people under the gun and be like, look, if you don't fix these things, these issues that you have in different places, we may have to let you go. And people at the time will kind of step up to the challenge, and then once they feel safe, they kind of go back to things. I would say as you manage over and over and you start to get a gut feeling about things, your gut's usually correct. I have found in some situations near-death experiences, although I hope that doesn't happen to anyone, that's where I see people actually change. They're like, okay, I need to get my shit in line. I'm not talking about that for work, but I'm just thinking in life in general. People are kind of who they are. And the other thing about that, too, is I use this as a good example because even on my team, sometimes now I have these people that are super intense about things and they don't interact really well with people. And I know that's not going to change, but usually I can find a way to work with them to keep that intensity in a way that can work in a positive manner with the team. This is just one I have in here. I have something to talk to you about. If anyone's worked or even just growing up as a kid, someone that comes to you in the morning, they're like, hey, I need to talk to you about something. I got to go to a meeting right now. I'm going to talk to you about that later. You've just ruined your artist creativity and production for the rest of the day because you may just be, I may be like, hey, I'm going to promote you and this is going to be awesome. But in their brain, they're like, oh my God, what did I do? They're going through their emails and checking all the things. So just don't do that to people. If you're going to do it and you catch yourself, be like, I need to talk to you about this thing. And if it's something bad, just don't, just wait. Get to know people personally. This is something that I found is really valuable. Just on your team, it's good to know people so that if you ever have to have those hard conversations, which you will at some point, that you at least have a good relationship with them. In my job now, like I communicate with all the different game teams in our company. So one of the first things I do when getting to know people is try and figure out more about them. And then I get into the nitty-gritty with them. Always being available as a leader, it's important to always be available. I mean, you saw my schedule, it's a little crazy. I can't be available during all those meetings, but I am available to people. I keep my door open whenever I'm around. They can come in at any time. I give them my phone number, they can talk to me anytime. I try and be available for people all the time. And then going back to the thing about waiting tables, it's your fault. If your team messes up and does something, you as a leader should be the one that takes responsibility for that. And if that means that sometime you have to let someone go or do different things, that's on you. You got to figure that stuff and hold the shield for them. This book, I love this book. I think I look at books and different things as kind of like tutorials. You watch a ZBrush tutorial, it might be an hour long, and 2 minutes of it is something that you want to take and use. Books, things like that for management, I find these really useful. This one is great. Eat That Frog is an old phrase by Mark Twain, where he's a famous American novelist that wrote that if the hardest thing you have to do every day is eat a frog, might as well get it done in the morning so it's just done with. And I find that is, within management and leadership, is a really important thing to do. Like if you have to have a hard conversation with someone, it's better to do it early in the morning. And that's why I put this part, like time of day matters. If you ever have to give feedback to someone, like a negative feedback, I try to do it as early in the morning as possible in a work day. Because what I tend to find is 50% of the time or more, that person will have time to think about it during the day, and then by the end of the day, they might come back and want to ask me some things. I made the mistake in the past, because everyone hates having the hard conversation. I still hate it. I don't like doing that stuff. But if I do it at the end of the day, one, people are tired, and then two, generally, people are going to go home, they're going to think about that thing, and they're going to vent to whoever they're with. And of course, everyone at home is on your side. So suddenly they're going to be like, yeah, but you know what? Maybe that was bullshit, and blah, blah, blah. And they'll come back in the morning, and who knows? Maybe they've got their cousin who's a lawyer. He's ready to put a lawsuit on you. That didn't happen at Blizzard, if you're recording this, just so you know. Giving people the time to kind of come back and be available is really important. I would say you also don't want to do something at the end of the week if it's bad news. And also, I think this is important too, like biggest task first, whether it's a hard conversation or just for yourself. Like if you're a character modeler and you're like, oh man, I hate doing hands, but I know it's really important, but I really like doing facial stuff, but it's not as important. You should probably work on that hand thing because maybe someone needs it sooner. Like getting that stuff off your brain so that you're not thinking about it all the time, I find is really useful. This other thing, Wunderlist, this is an app that I share all the time. As a leader or even as an artist, everywhere that I go, if I, even here, I'm constantly like, oh, that's a cool idea, write it down. Good idea, write it down. Because you just tend to forget, especially in a work environment. So many things can come in and out during the day. This one, if anyone's worked professionally before, they know all about this. The email trap. A lot of different things. You'll constantly see these email chains at work. Like, I'll send something to someone. I'm like, hey, I just need to get your feedback on something. It's like one person. They're like, cool, looping in so-and-so. And then the other person's like, looping in this person. Before you know it, you have 15 people on an email string, and then people are like fighting, and you have no idea what it's about because you're like, I just wanted to talk to you about how this finger bends. So the moment I see email chains kind of get out of order, I just get up from my desk and go talk to people and try and handle that in person. Other thing too, when I say there's no emotion in email reading or writing, is if you're having a bad day and you come into work and someone like, and you guys probably feel it even here now as students, and someone writes a thing like, what were you thinking about that art piece that you were working on today? It could be a question like, they're just really interested, but to you, if you're in a bad mood, you might be thinking like, what? Why is this person like saying, what are they thinking about this thing? So just whenever you read something, if you're in a bad mood, don't assume that someone is like pissed off at you. Maybe they are, but usually they're not. The other thing I would say too, whenever you're writing something, if you're really upset about something, I would recommend that if you're thinking about putting it in writing, send it to yourself first and read it the next day. I don't know how many times I do this where I'm just like, I will burn all this. And if I would send that, it could be really bad and it's going to be taken out of context. And usually I'll read it in the morning and be like, you know what, that wasn't a big deal. So I do that constantly. I recommend the next time you guys do that, or that text that you want to send someone because you're upset, send it to yourself and then see if you need to. The other reason too is it's written in stone, and that stuff could come back to you. Groupthink. This is an interesting one. Whether you guys are students and you're in a class and everyone's getting together talking about ideas, or you're in a company and you're talking about the next big video game that you're going to create, a lot of people sometimes, this is interesting, you know, whenever you walk in anywhere, even when you walk into this room today, people tend to put a number on everyone that they see. Whether you realize it or not, you're constantly, hierarchy-wise, you're looking at different people in a room and you're putting a number on something. So when people come to a meeting room with me, they're like, that's the boss. This is a VP guy, this different thing. And because of that, a lot of people that are just new in a company, et cetera, they might not want to speak up. Or if they have a really good idea, you guys should check this out, the NASA Challenger disaster. Don't check out the explosions, but because it's horrible. I remember seeing that as a kid in elementary school. But there's a really good YouTube video. It's like 5 minutes long. And if you just search that up, it talks to you all about what groupthink is. And the idea behind that was, even back in the day, there was a group of people that were discussing whether they were going to launch the NASA or not, or the Challenger. And one of the mechanics or somebody was talking like, hey, I think there's some stuff that's faulty and it's loose. We really need to check this. We shouldn't be launching it. And other people were like, no, it should be fine. We should do that. And eventually, as more and more higher up people were like, no, it should be fine. We're going to do this, or we have to do this. The world's watching. That other person was kind of like, oh, okay, I guess you're probably right. Not a big deal. And we all know how that ended. If you don't, the shuttle went up and it blew up and everyone died. So, you know, I would say the lesson to take out of something like that is whenever you're in a room, if you're a leader, think of yourself as like a judge in a room. Try and make sure that everyone has an opportunity to speak, but don't force them to. I never tell someone like, what do you think? I'll always be like, do you have anything to add? Because a lot of times someone doesn't have anything to add. But at least it gives them an opportunity to talk, because you guys probably have all experienced this, that one guy, Joe, and he won't shut up, and he's the one that's talking nonstop in the thing, and maybe you want to say something, you just can't get your voice in. So as a leader, making sure people can talk. And then also, don't be afraid if you do have a voice. Like, literally, I still do it to this day. I'll like raise my hand so someone sees me, and then I can bring it up. I love this quote. If you guys like Game of Thrones, I assume a lot of people have seen this. As a leader, this is something I try to live by. Going back to like the hard conversation and all that, no one likes to have those talks where you're telling someone that they need to improve on something, or you're not interacting well with someone, or God forbid, eventually you have to let someone go. But it's really important as a leader to be able to look at someone and do that and give them at least opportunities to fix things, and then if you have to do things, be the one that does that. Because people will thank you eventually in the end. Maybe they won't always, but I don't know. I think that's really valuable to be able to do that yourself and have the confidence to do that. Separate personal feelings. As a leader, you need to be able to do this because I'm close friends with all the people that I work with. I know their families, and a lot of my people are international. And sometimes I'll have to make a decision that might mean that someone loses a visa and all that, and they have to literally move back to the country they're from. So you need to be able to do that, like if you have a bad apple, or do different things and be able to confidently do that. And I won't say that I'm cold, and I do separate emotions, but during those decisions, when I do that, I do it, and you know, I'll go home and I might even cry about it, and it sucks, but at least I can make those decisions for the company. Examples, I think, giving annual reviews to people, doing any of that type of stuff. Always make sure you have examples of things if you have to give someone negative feedback. It's always personal, so I say this one, separate personal feelings, but it's always personal. This is for subordinates, people that are on your team. Never as a leader tell someone like, hey, this isn't personal, it's just business. To them, it's very personal all the time. Employee 101, for all of you out here, what I recommend whenever you get into a company is bring the solutions to problems. The thing that I love whenever people come to me, or I even do with my leaders, is like if something's broken, like let them know about it, but also be like, hey, I think that if we do this, it might fix it, if you have an idea. And that's going to help your manager a lot because they've got so many different things going on. And also, too, it's going to show that you have maybe some of those qualities that they're going to think about in the future if they wanted to put someone else as a leader. Separate emotion from work. Be passionate about what you do, but in the end of the day, if someone has to, if I'm your supervisor and I have to take something from you because you're just not hitting it, you're not getting the artistic quality, or you're missing a deadline, be cool with that, because it's not easy for a manager to do that. And then when they give that to the person that's sitting next to you, try and be comfortable with that person too, and use that as a learning experience. Like, we're all passionate about what we do, but in the end of the day, when you're at a company and you're working, you're getting paid to do what you do, so it is important that you follow the instructions of the leaders that work with you. Being proactive, how can you help out? Anytime you can be proactive and see additional things that you can do to help out your team or other people, management does realize that. Promotions are earned, not given. I have a lot of people these days who are like, hey, just give me this checklist of all the things I need to do to be promoted. I'm like, okay, I can give you that checklist, but at the same time, there's certain additional things that you want to see from people. It's not just filling out the checklist, but doing those proactive things, like how can I help? How can I go up and beyond? I think it's really important to do that and always be constantly going for a thing, because a company like Blizzard, people rarely ever leave. Like, I was environment modeling supervisor for 8 years. People probably never thought I was going to leave. And because there's different people, and I'll use actually our character modeling position as an example. We had a soup on that team, and he was there for 8 years. No one ever thought he would leave, and there was one guy on the team who he was always like, hey, we should do this new tool idea. We should get these different people together. He was constantly doing all these extra things. And then there was another artist who had been there much longer than him that was also interested in one day leading, but he never thought he was going to leave. So suddenly that guy left, and that position became available, and the guy that was more hungry about it, that had only been in the company for 2 years, got the position, not the person that had been there 10 years. So I would say, don't just think that someone is like, you know what, I'm never going to get this thing, so because I'm not going to make the extra effort. If you want something like that, always be going for it, because you never know, or you never know when a supervisor's going to be like that other job on another team. You should check that out. Never assume people don't like me, etc. I'll use an example of one of my artists on my team recently. He is known to be someone that needs to stay super focused, always got his headphones on, and I'm not his supervisor, but he has 2 teammates that are right beside him, and his supervisor came by one morning knowing that he shouldn't distract him and said, hey, good morning to the 2 people that were beside him, but didn't say good morning to that guy. So for like a week, that guy was like, why does my supervisor hate me? He didn't even say good morning to him. And I talked to him, the other guy's supervisor, because the artist was too afraid to talk to him. And I was like, hey, was there a thing there? He's like, no, I don't want to distract him. You know, I want him to stay focused because he's kicking so much ass. So yeah, don't assume anything. You know, there's very few people that ever come to work to make it their goal to ruin your day. Just usually something else is going on. You don't know if there was like a fight someone had in the day, or it's just like a weird assuming thing. Remind your manager. Managers are constantly doing stuff all the time, and maybe they'll tell you, hey, this is awesome, I'm going to give you this task, and then a week goes by and nothing happens. It's okay to remind your manager, hey, remember that thing we talked about? Totally okay to do that. We're wrapping this up now. One thing that's really important, I think, for everyone, and for me especially as a supervisor that constantly gets stressed out about different things, I call it healthy stress because I love my job, but if I don't find ways to kind of turn my brain off, I can be really distracted by things. So for me, I love surfing. This is my surfing selfie. And I actually got to surf when I came here to Australia. We went to Kilcunda, and someone took me out, and we got to surf. And the first day I went out, it was like way overhead, and I got my ass kicked. But it took my brain off things because I was trying to survive as I was tumbling under the water. But for me, surfing detaches my brain whenever I'm working and doing stressful things. Other thing I think is really important to do for yourself, even as students, even if you can't afford to do an awesome trip, do things every now and then to reward yourself, because we work hard, we do things. I try to do something every 2 or 3 months where I have like a cool 3-day weekend trip, or Jessica and I will, my wife Jessica and I will play video games or do different things like that. And it just always gives you something to look forward to. Like this trip, I was constantly stressed about all these other things with my new job changing, but I always knew that this awesome trip was coming up. I get to hang out with Alex, Furio, all these other amazing artists, and I've met a lot of people here that'll be friends of mine for life. You guys might recognize this guy. His name's Fausto De Martini. He's a guy I worked with at Blizzard who's an amazing artist. I showed his artwork earlier. This is him and I at UFC in Las Vegas. We're huge UFC fans, and I remember we were both super stressed about stuff, and we were like, you know what, 4 months from now is a cool event. Why don't we just go? And you and I, Furio, we'll go one day too. And And we sat down, and it was in the U.S. I thought I'd be surrounded by Americans, and we were around nothing but Brazilians. And all these guys knew Fausto, and that's them behind them. So I had to cheer for the Brazilians, too, because I didn't want to get killed. But there's this one thing that they say, you always hear the Brazilians, if you watch UFC, that there's this one chant they do, and I'm like, what does that mean? It means rip his head off. I was like, oh. And just kind of wrapping things up, never stop learning. It's really important not only for your career, but for yourself. Never just kind of settle. It's really easy to settle sometimes. Whenever I came here, I didn't get a chance to show it with the demo that I was given yesterday, but I'll show it eventually. Nald, there was some new stuff that I learned for this amulet that I created yesterday. Keyshot, I learned how to create materials for that other piece that I did that I showed yesterday. And then learning new things at 408. Being your own director, super fun. I'll just wrap it up on this. These are different books that I like. A couple things. I listen to a lot of audiobooks. And again, I'm not telling you, like, you have to do this and focus on these things forever. This is the Bible of stuff. That's not the case. These are just books that I've really enjoyed. And in fact, if you guys don't have time to see all these right now, it's on my Art of Seth Thompson Facebook page somewhere. I posted it like a year or two ago. You can find that image. Yeah, I enjoy reading these different books, different things that kind of help give you different ideas about stuff. That pretty much wraps things up.